Okay, so one of the other things that the Tartarian theorists claim is that for the World's Fair buildings that were they say were pre-existing before the Westerners came to the United States, um, they say that even well into because the fair we know the fair specifically the Chicago World's Fair took place in 1893, so that's the tail end of the Industrial Revolution, and we all know everyone knows this. And so they say that there wasn't enough or any infrastructure or technology to build those buildings. But as we see here, this is a map of the United States, a rail map, circa 1800s, mid to late 1800s, and there's plenty of rail lines everywhere. This is when you get into the time of the fair, the transcontinental railroads had been already built for many years already. And even you can see there's a bunch of rail service all around the West. This is long after the gold rush and long after San Francisco and all the major cities of the West Coast were up and running. So it's just ridiculous that you can claim there's even, I think by shipping was all around up to the Great Lakes. I don't remember when the canal system, I think, well, not lake, but the river, I forget, you might know this, Michael, the river that connects, I think, Lake Ontario to the Atlantic. Anyway, shipping was all up and down, globally at this point, right? This is the era of steam. And by the late 1890s or the early 1890s, now you have electricity. So you both have both timelines connecting to each other. The age of steam and the age of electricity are kind of colliding right here. So you have both the best of both worlds. You have all the steam power, everything is steam powered, and things were starting to be powered by electricity. So, and there's plenty of infrastructure going on. So this is another stupid aspect of the Tartarian theory. So there's a better map of all the rail lines crossing everywhere, certainly around Chicago. Chicago was there's two epicenters of the U.S. at this time in the 19th century, that's New York and Chicago. And actually, from the beginning of the fair, when they wanted to get the fair up and running, there was a big battle between New York and Chicago about who was going to host the fair. And then there's a whole history behind all this, and because Congress had to get involved, and Congress even provided some of the funding. They had to organize who was going to get the fair, Chicago, New York, and all the mayors and local politicians and U.S. politicians got involved, and it was a whole big thing. And there's volumes and volumes and tens of thousands of documents and news articles and archives. And you can spend days, you can spend your whole life researching all the fairs, and even just specifically the Chicago Fair of 1893, and all documenting the building of these buildings and how they did it and why they did it, and etc. On and on. And so here's all the rail lines going in and out of Chicago. So you can come from any part of the country and go see the fair. No big deal. And here's all the streets and more rail lines and the rivers and stuff of Chicago of that period. So no big deal. You can do it. So here's a map just before. This is from 1892 or before the fair opened. So this is some of the stuff is different. Like I don't think this tower was built, and the waterfront was kind of different. So this is not exactly what it ended up looking like. But this is they started to print out advertising. The rail lines that you can take to go to see the fair. So there's roads and there's tons of maps and photographs showing, because I know I've seen some Tartarian videos where the people they didn't have roads and they didn't have tools, and okay, whatever. This is like the Industrial Revolution again. Okay, so here's a building. I don't know what this building is, but it's a good example of 19th century, and maybe even this might even be built in the 20th century. But anyway, so one of the hallmarks of neoclassical buildings is that they're fake. Okay, so classical buildings, like in ancient Rome and Greece and and Egypt and all that stuff were the megalithic buildings, right? And we don't even know how they did it because our machinery can't even lift those stones today. So how do they build these things recently? So, well, what they did is this building behind all this facade work is just a regular sticks and bricks building, just regular red clay bricks and wood frames. And then they just put on over that this moldings and coverings. So you can see the seam here, and you can see these aren't real blocks. These are just the facade of blocks because there's no grout. It's just all continuous one material, and all this stuff is stuck on, and there's the seams, and we'll see more of this as we go along. That's how they did it. Okay, this is just an example of how technology progresses. So this is the Titanic. So it sank in 1912, and then they built it, I don't know, early 1910ish or so, or something like that. And basically the technology that they used to build the Titanic is what they used to build the buildings back in the 1890s. Same technology, and you see how technology progresses is the modern day cruise ships that dwarf the Titanic. Anyway, I just threw that in. But so anyway, here's the inside, one of the main buildings of the World's Fair. So you can see, as we'll see later on, that there's nothing to these buildings. They're hollow inside, and they're just iron frame and wire and coverings, shingles on top, and facades on the front, and nothing behind in the inside. Just empty space to house all the exhibits. And they had plenty of technology back then. So yeah, here we go. So here's the administration building. This is a portion of the fair. It looks very impressive, but it's and here's the kind of the telltale signs over here. The roofing is just plain old factory roofing, tar and paper roofs with glass and glass panels and tiles. And you can see again the no theory that there's no technology back then. Well, here's a big bustling smoggy city with steam engines and factories working and making stuff happen. So yeah, it's pretty impressive. Oh, here's another peek at it's a regular, these things were roofed just with regular factory roofing. That's one of the signs that give the whole thing away. And so yeah, they had lighting back then, plenty of lighting. This is 1893. So again, yeah, all very impressive, but you start to notice that everything's brand new. It's all the same color. It's all monochromatic, and not because it's a black and white picture, but just because you can tell, even though it's black and white, everything's all the same color, whitewashed, because they just went ahead and plastered over the wood framing of these buildings and then just painted it with white paint. Okay, so and also the whole area is landscapes. It's brand new landscaping, and then when in the areas behind, all the ornamentation and fancy design starts to drop off, and you can just see how it's just quickly finished. There's some just plaster spread on the bottom there, and it gets better as we go along. And you can see here this dome. It's not a real classical dome. It's just modern for the day, steel and iron girders and wire. And cabling, I should say. And we'll see them building this. So this is wood framing here because it's not that big and it's not that high. And then we needed to build the big domes. They used iron and cables. And there's the inside, and you can see how crappy everything is. Not because it's ancient, it's because it's just crappy. You can see the pieces stuck together. So these things, the fair only lasted for like 6 months. And it took 2 years to build, lasted 6 months. And in the harsh weather of Chicago, right on Lake Michigan, hot summer, cold winter, the buildings didn't last long because they weren't designed to last long at all. And there was only one building, or actually there's 2 surviving buildings. I forgot what the other one was. This is the Palace of Fine Arts. So this is them refurbishing the building, I think in 2019. So they rebuilt it and refurbished it and retrofitted the building. We'll see this later on. But yeah, that building was the only one built for real because the insurance company demanded a real building because this is where all the artwork from all over the world was going to be housed and displayed. So, all that stuff is worth even millions back then. So they all had to be protected by a real building. And the insurance companies wouldn't insure the artwork otherwise. So here we go with one of the first high-res pictures that I have here. You can zoom in way in, and you can just see how everything's brand new and brand new sharp edges, and it's not ancient at all. It literally was built, finished, like a month ago or whatever. And you can see where the places where it didn't matter, they just didn't bother finishing anything, and they just finished bare minimum of what they needed to finish. Okay, so it's like concrete and or brick or whatever, and then just plaster, molded stuff here. Okay, so and they built it over reclaimed marshland. So part of the building process was to reclaim all this marshland right there on the outside of the city on the coast of Lake Michigan, because there wasn't really any space because Chicago was a heavily industrialized city and there wasn't any room, and they felt it was would be boring to go west of the city or south of the city to the kind of prairie lands. So they decided to, one of the main designer decided to, well, let's build it right on the beach, and we'll just reclaim some of this marshland. And then, so what that involved was just pounding in thousands of wood pilings, and then building a deck over the pilings, and then building on top of that. So again, these buildings are just wood frame buildings with plaster and paint, and so they're not very heavy. So that's why they're able to stand. And these were true megalithic ancient structures. They would never. They would just sink down into the mud. They would press down on the pilings and sink into the mud. So, and then you see just wood coverings to cover up the pilings underneath. And it's just the wood decking. And here's one of the little boats. These are actually electric boats. So they had a pretty good technology back then. So here again, brand new, just a wharf, quickly made by just throwing some rock, flagstone, and rock probably from just a nearby quarry. And here's some of the pilings that they laid down horizontally to make a wharf, and the edging. And then here's just freshly made, what do you call it, landscaping, just done, literally brand new. Okay, so here, very impressive, very beautiful, amazing. But then when you get up close, it all starts to fall apart. So this dome is not a real dome. It's just iron or wood frame inside. I don't know, probably covered in canvas and then painted over. And you can see the frame popping through the canvas covering. You can see here just a really cheap, quickly made seam, where the different pieces of canvas were laid over and connected together. So basically really sewn together. You can see how it's lashed together, and you can see that it's just real crude and simply cheaply made. It's pretty impressive. It's nice. Here you see the framing inside popping through and cracking in the weather. Okay, not because it's old, because it's new and cheaply made. We'll see all these, get better images of this stuff and get closer in, and you can see how it just kind of falls apart. And you can see here the crude statuary. Again, these are just plaster statues, just wire and wood frame, and then just canvas or even paper mache, and then covered in plaster, and then either painted or gold leaf, depending on the statue. So you can see how crudely, when a lot of these structures meet other services, how it's just real crude and cheap. And see the brand new landscaping, just freshly laid down. Okay, here's inside one of those buildings. So all those fancy buildings that we just saw on the outside. Oh yeah, I was going to mention the columns. We'll see I have columns. We can see later on. I forget what building this is, but on the Palace of Fine Arts, the one of the few buildings that survived, it really became dilapidated, and you can see inside these columns, and inside these columns are just a frame, and then this is all just covering over the frame. So these aren't real columns. We'll see that later on. So, okay. Look at this. All the buildings were built like this, except for the Palace of Fine Arts. So you see this crazy outside, and you go inside. This is what it looks like inside. All the buildings are like this. This is brand new, freshly constructed wood boards made as a backing. And then on the other side, they just put on this mold. They call it staff. It was plaster mixed with hemp or straw, and then painted over. And then we'll see that these are prefabricated. They just made sections of these, and then they just bust them in on train cars and just put them together like a big erector set. All you need is a couple cranes and a handful of guys, and they'll just put the stuff together. You just repeat the same system over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, on and on to whatever you need, and then you just put a wood roof on top with glass panes. And you see here for the fresh wood paneling inside. On the outside is that fake facade. Okay, so here we can zoom in and see how everything was just bolted together. So these pilings to make the bridge railing, it's just iron bolted down onto the bridge, and then cheap iron piping, tubing to make the railing, and that's all it is. That's all it is. And then see again the uniform, the brand new uniformity, everything, because everything was just spray painted literally probably weeks ago. It's the administration building. And we can see, I have pictures of this being built. Okay, here, I like this picture here. So this is the fountain. Actually, some of the stuff is pretty bad. So the fountain, supposedly the Tartarian theorists say this is an ancient building site, right? But you can tell this is thrown together real quick. Just some pumice rock. I don't know how they stuck it together. Held over the fountain nozzle system, and just pumice rocks piled over on top. It was just real quick and easy. And there's the machinery of the fountains, contemporary technology of the day. And I don't know if these are lamps, hooded lamps, lights, or drains or something, but it's real shoddy work. And again, where one surface meets another, it's just they didn't spend the time to finish everything real nice. This is all kind of crappy. So here's kind of like a moat to, I don't know, control the water or whatever. And then here are these pilings for the railings. So I'm guessing these are either plaster or iron, but either way, you can see how they're just molded pieces, 2 or 3 molded pieces. So probably 2 halves here, and then a molded end cap on top, or maybe this might be one whole 2 halves, but you can't really tell. I don't see a flashing here, so it might be a whole end cap. And then you see the flashing down here. So these are 2 separate pieces, and it's just rough. They didn't bother to finish it. They didn't bother to finish anything, because who cared? It was just for 6 months. It was just to charge, I think, 50 cents a head to go see the fair. And they actually did make a profit. So, and you see again the rough flashing. Yeah, you kind of see the thin seam, but who knows? Anyway, either way, yeah, these are just put together, slapped together. You can see the bubbles for as this material is molded, whether it's plaster or iron, same thing. Real quick and easy and cheap. And so again, yeah, these aren't real blocks. This is just molded surface. And you can see where it meets the water. It's all rough and just crappy. Okay, see, here's another one of my favorite pictures. So there's this crappy statuary, just badly and quickly done. It's cheap. That's terrible. It's not classical. It's not the statuary and the great ancient empires. It's just 1890s crap. So, and people even call it the Disneyland of the day. It was just kind of the original Disneyland. So you can see the seams of the wood paneling, and then the spray painted or covered over with the staff, the plaster. You can see how rough is. They didn't even bother finishing it or do a good job. They just put this up real quick. There's no grout because these aren't real stones. This is just paneling, just wood paneling. And you can see, where is it? Yeah, right here you start to see the different wood sections. And then in the weather, how it's already breaking apart here, right here. So this is like high school wood shop. It's like a miter box cut, angled pieces of wood frame joined together. It's the joint that you make in wood shop in high school, and then you just paint over it. And then here's a section. So here's another joint here, and then a plant panel. You see the seam, and you see the seam, the cracking. Okay, so they painted over it or plastered over it, and the rough Chicago environment off of Lake Michigan, it's already starting to crack and degrade. And they didn't bother. Here's the flashing of just where they just kind of quickly plastered over everything and didn't really do a good job to finish it. And here you go, more seams and gaps, and cracks all over. Here you go, so you can see the seams of the different wood. And here he goes, this more degrading of the material, the cheap material. Here it goes, cracking alongside the joints. Okay, here you go, clearly here you see the line of the wood framing. Okay. And got some major cracking here. The plaster is already starting to crack off. And here, you see this is just above head height. Here's a guy here. And this is where, on the edge, people like to touch shit and mess with stuff, right? So as the crowds go by, they're touching the edge and messing with it, and they eventually just broke through, and it's hollow inside. Okay? That's all this is. You can see how it's all crappily made. Here's the seam right here. The seams right there, just wood pieces fitted together. And it's all starting to come apart, and so wood piece. We'll see later in pictures I have what these are. These are just pieces of molding. Okay, just lines. These aren't brick, these aren't stone, not masonry at all. Just wood pieces fitted together. See, there's a seam. There's this all just framing, just frame moldings and framing. There's a piece of wood, but they probably fucked up here, so they made a piece of wood to fit in, just like you do in wood shop. Okay, here's closely here. These are probably plaster or iron painted over and just stuck together. So that's all this stuff is. So you can see where they didn't need to do a good job, where it meets the ground. This is concrete, then bricks here, and then bother to paint everything. And here just planking, wood, boardwalk, just molded vases, mass produced in a factory probably nearby. Okay, and again, you see the domes, the framing underneath the domes, just plastered and then gold leafed. Here we go, more inside. And just brand new wood boards, and iron girders and iron framing. Wood framing looks here, and iron framing here, iron columns to hold everything up. And wood paneling on the inside. So outside again is that fancy wood stucco, moldings and designs, and then inside is just a wood building. Okay, again here where different materials come to meet. It's just all crappy. You can stick your hand through there and stick your hand underneath because it's hollow. Okay, brand new wood flooring, brand new wood, contemporary windows for the day. Everything's brand new, just made. Same thing. So here you see just the way they did things back in the day. They just repeat. You truck in all these different pieces, you put them together with a crane, and you just repeat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just put in the roofing, window panes, and probably some kind of tiling or wood for the top of the solid parts of the roof. And again, the wood paneling on the inside. Outside, you have the fake plaster, or real plaster, however you want to say it. Not everything was covered over with the plaster decorations, so this is just common iron bridge of the day. Common iron bridge of the day. Okay, it's all brand new. Built within 2 years. There's plenty of time to do all this stuff. So here you go. There's the plaster is rotting and delaminating. All the different parts are coming apart in the hot summer and cold winter. During the 6 months this was here, or longer, depending on when everything was finished. I'm sure different stuff was finished at different times during the 2-year building period. So anyway, you can see how it just was thrown together real quick. How crappy this is not even straight. All these are crooked and not even straight, and it's already falling apart. It gets bored because it's like, this place fucking sucks. There's even an article saying that where a guy said this is a sham. They thought these are all real buildings and stuff too back then. Even like, wow, they built all this. Oh, you go in and find out it's just plaster crap. Okay, so here's just a modern, or for the day, modern retaining wall to hold, to put in the landscaping, and then the floor, I don't know what to say, but I'm getting tired. But anyway, the foundation work, right, to put the buildings on, and then the retaining wall to keep all that in, and then the lagoons and stuff that they made, and the landscaping they made out of the reclaimed swamp. Okay, so here's another more crappy statuary, just quickly made, just canvas and plaster and wire, paper mache, like you made in high school. And then here again, when one material meets another material, again, you can stick your hand in there. It's hollow. You can see how the wooden stairs just keep going underneath, because this is just a hollow structure with a frame. Part is the real simple frame underneath to hold this up. This is nothing. It weighs nothing. And that's all it is. All this is just plaster crap. Okay, so this is in the Midway area. They call it the Midway. This is basically the kind of the fair part, the Fairplex part, the amusement park area, I mean. And again, it's all just cheap fake buildings with painted on. They didn't even bother with the fancy plaster stuff. This is basically just painted on decorations and glued on stuff like this ladder. This might be an actual service ladder, but it's just glued on. And then they try to make like a medieval entrance with a gate, right? It doesn't even go all the way. This is just wood frame to make believe, iron gate. And it's just like a beer garden. So here's more of that wood coverings with the pilings underneath. And here's one of the exhibits with all the showing the weaponry of the day and stuff like that. Okay, this is World War I isn't too far off. This is inside the Palace of Fine Art. So again, just iron columns. These are iron columns and iron girders and ironwork to keep the whole thing up. And just very simple, quickly made roofing. It almost looks like it's fabric. Okay, here's the horticulture building. This is that dome we saw. So again, it's just a glass dome. And we'll see inside as they build this. This is just a big, is the iron framing. And everything's labeled 1892, horticulture. So I don't know what the Tartarian theorists say about that. These aren't ancient buildings. These are brand new, kind of cheesy fake buildings for a fair. And here's a modern, contemporary person or people. And then mixed in with common neoclassical decorations. Again, this is all plaster fakery. Okay, here's more of the technology of the day. And here you can see the pilings. This is what they built all this stuff out of. Just steam barge would come in, the steam powered barge would come in, the steam powered like pounding thing, and just pound in these wood pilings into the bed of the river, of the lake here, of Lake Michigan. And then they just put boarding on top. And it takes a lot of work, but that's what they did back then. That's what they made all the wharves are out of this. All the wharves and piers for all the shipping and industry, all just made the same way. And, you know, this is before the Federal Reserve and all that. So they had, everything was cheap. You know, labor was cheap. And so they could do it. There was no OSHA laws and no permitting, and you know, to get permits, you just build it. Here's the ticket office. So yeah, boats would come in from different parts of the Great Lakes and drop people off. You jump on a ferry and go see the fair and get your ticket at the ticket booth, and you go in right here. There's the first part of those big buildings that we see. There's more of that crappy statuary. And here's how they did it. This is the application of the staff. So this is the wood frame, and this is the cheap fake moldings, and then they put the staff over this, and then they paint it. That's all it is. It's all it is. We'll see that later on. So here is another, it's a modern picture of still existing, looks like a railroad station somewhere in Europe. And this is just how they built things back then. So this is still standing today. Or maybe not. Maybe it's gone by now. I don't know when this picture was taken. But so basically, yeah, this is how they did stuff back then. Here's Shenzhen. I don't know why I put this in there. This is that real high-tech city in China. This is where everything is based off of. Okay, see the progression of technology. This is how they built stuff in the 1800s. And this is how we're able to build this stuff today. There's the cranes, and you'll see pictures of them building that stuff back in the day, and it's the same principle. So this is how we can do stuff today, based on what they did in yesterday, right? This is Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. You know, this is all recent build, how technology and how things have progressed. You know. Here's the capital again, Kazakhstan. And remember, there was a conspiracy theory saying that this was the capital of the cabal. No, it's just the capital of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan used to be a Soviet state, and it's one of the stans, right? And they have oil. They produce oil, and they sell it. They make money selling it to Russia and to India and China. And so once you leave this capital, it becomes a poor developing nation. So. But yeah, I think it's a couple million people population, and it's brand new, and they're still building stuff today probably. And this is what, you know, so basically these two, this is what, okay, so back in the US, back then, this is what, you know, things are today in other countries. Without the city of London fucking with us, okay? If we were left alone, this is what Trump wants to do. Wants to bring back this kind of, you know, ability. So when this fair opened, this is the age of when, unless you were a part of the British Empire, you were a sovereign nation, and all nations were sovereign, and most of the nations of the world had some kind of infrastructure and money. Brazil during this time was like one of the richest nations on the planet back then. And that's what Trump is, you know, McKinley and all that. That's what Trump has been talking about. He wants to bring this back where you can just build a whole city, or at least a fake one, in a couple of years, and pay people to do it and get people jobs and you know, do stuff like this again. So we can have cities like this. Okay, but the cabal has done it so we don't have any infrastructure today. But yes, these days they had infrastructure. Today we don't. So that's why the Tartarian theory kind of distracts you. This is the California pavilion. So most states had a pavilion there to showcase their stuff. And again, so you can see how when one surface meets another, it's just crappy, and no one cared enough, didn't have time to make it look good. So you see this thing's crooked, that big ornamentation is like just falling over almost. And okay, it looks like this on the outside, right? On the inside, this is inside the California exhibit. There's a big thing of oranges, and this is what it looks like inside. It's just wood and cabling and glass skylights. Okay, so again, yeah, it looks impressive, but it's all made in 1892. Okay, so here, when you get closer, all this stuff starts to fall apart, starts to look real cheap. So it's all just stuff being held up by wooden beams, just cheap paintings and moldings. It's plaster moldings. You even see how here they fucked up and they had to like just cut that part off and just shove it in there. So it's just a wood frame. You see the wood slats here, the wood boards. Same thing here, wood boards, painted and plastered over and with ornamentation stuck on. It's mass produced this ornamentation. Another thing the Tartarian theorists say is that the construction pictures you see, which we'll see later, and I have time to organize everything too well, but there's no pictures, no people in the pictures. And I forget why they say that's what it is, but big deal. Just search for, do a Google search of imagery of modern construction sites, and you see no people. Because you know why? Because when I was taking pictures, that's when one of my favorite subjects was architecture. And so you would go to a building site to take pictures, and the time you would want to go is when there's no foreman and no workers to tell you to get the fuck out, so you can take your pictures in peace and take pictures whatever you want without anybody bothering you. So that's why there's no one in these pictures, because they went when there's no one there. Okay, so here we go, the building, the administration building. So it's, and then here, another reason why there's no one in a lot of those pictures, and well, guess what? There are people in these pictures. So there's a guy here, and then this guy's moving. So the photography technology was kind of not good back then. So the exposure times had to be real long in order to get an image. So if you were moving, you wouldn't be captured by the film. So this person's blurred out. This person got resolved into the picture because he's standing still. This person was just moving along. So he got totally blurred out. And it looks like there's another person here that's almost totally disappeared. And if you're moving fast enough, the camera wouldn't catch you at all. So then here is all the piling work for the lagoons and the decking over the pilings to make the foundation for the buildings. And again, they're just all iron and wood framing. And then you can see here how they're the framing, and then they're slowly putting on the coverings, which they'll just plaster over and paint over. So they're already starting to paint over sections, and they're not done at all here. See, it's all just framing, and there's a scaffolding, and all this is framing. See, all that is wood framing. Okay, they made this kind of diagonal framing to make it easier to put on the fake panels, the decorative panels. And then the dome is not a real dome. It's just a frame of a dome. And then you put fake panels over it. Okay, here it is as the construction is moving along. And yeah, there's no people, but there's horses here. It looks like something's moving here. And probably people moving about, so they didn't get resolved into the picture. Or it's at a time where everybody's on their break, so the photographer wouldn't have to be bothered. And so they're getting stuff done. You can see the coverings are being put on and being painted or plastered over with. There's still some scaffolding here, and they're almost done with the dome part. So that iron and cabling frame is now being covered over. And you can see here, whatever this is still being built with the scaffolding here and a frame. And then they had plenty of infrastructure. Like that other guy mentioned in another video, they got a rail line and electricity coming in. No big deal. Or 1890s. So it's 1892, and this is I'm going to say this is either the Women's Building or the Palace of Fine Arts. Probably the Women's Building. And I think it might say it's the Architectural Building. Okay, I was wrong. It's the Architectural Building, and you can see the different stages. So all the framing, just this iron and cabling, wood framing down here, and then they're slowly putting on the plaster fake facade. So you can see here, this is not a classical megalithic building. It's just a wood frame and then fake molding put on, just like you would do today. And there's all the building material, and the guys are having their break on the building material. I see tons of wood just for the building of this, because it's made out of wood. So here we go. Again, I don't know which building this is, but it's one of those. There's basically only 6 buildings, too, that made up the buildings that the Tartarian theorists are calling ancient buildings that were there prior to Westerners arriving in the New World. So there's just all wood. That's why there were 2 major fires while the fair was ongoing, and that's why there were fires. So that's why the city of Chicago had everything bulldozed down afterwards, because it was all a fire hazard. They didn't want to repeat they didn't want to have another Chicago fire. And also, once it was done, they made their money. They didn't need to, because it would cost money to maintain all this stuff. And frankly, the buildings were already falling apart by the end of the fair. And as you hear, all the prefabbed iron pieces, they were probably just made and put together somewhere nearby offsite, loaded up into flatbed rail cars, and just railed in, brought in, and ready to use. As a crane would lift these up and put them into place, and you just repeat the process over and over again until you're done. And so, yeah, here's that kind of angled framing to make it easier to stick the coverings on. Okay, here's the another stage of the administration building being built. So again, you can see how it's all just fake, meant to look like classical monolithic buildings, but not. So you can see each stage of the construction, just simple framing, wood and iron and cabling, and then you just put on these panels. It looks like either they're painting it, looks like the wooden panels are put on, and then they're just painting over it. And then we'll see inside these columns later on, because it looks like here the columns are pretty much built. And these aren't load-bearing columns, they're just decoration. The load-bearing structure is here. Okay, it's all just an immense frame. Because that picture again. Okay, here we're moving on. This is the Palace of Fine Arts, I believe. The only real building, again, but just made from cinder blocks, just made from regular stone blocks. The next stage up from clay bricks, the cinder blocks, the cinder block building, same thing, like we still do use today. So here's another, I didn't have time to organize these as well as I like to, but another picture of a construction site with no people. So no big deal. Here, there's some people down here, but you can see the progression. We'll see these cranes later. We didn't get to see real examples of the cranes back then, but I have other pictures coming up that show cranes. So the progression of technology, what we can do today, is built on with what they did in yesterday. Okay, another construction site with no people. Another construction site with no people. And then actually most of the pictures have people. So there's a guy right here. So this is the horticulture building, I think. And so again, just wood frame. So if you didn't need to go high up, they just build it with wood. And this dome is a smaller dome and not high up, so they just built it with wood. You can see the wood paneling, like wood boards, just kind of pressed into shape over a wooden frame, and then the wood framing underneath. And then they just put the plaster parts on. See, here they are putting the plaster parts on. So yeah, the slanted wood framing, and then you just stick these on. And then the bigger stuff, when you needed more stability and more sturdiness in the structure, then you build the bigger stuff and the higher stuff with iron and cables. And then you just stick the stuff over it. So these we saw earlier, these bigger ribs got those decorative coverings, and then in between were the glass panels. Okay, here's the administration building finished. And the crowds. So, why would you... So the story is that they destroyed everything to hide it from the public. But maybe like 22 million people would see the fair. So if everybody saw these buildings, why then you try to cover it up? It doesn't make sense. Or I don't know why I had all these pictures in there. Get more pictures of the inside. Again, it's just basically a warehouse. So here's the Ferris wheel. So Mr. Ferris built the first large Ferris wheel here at the fair. So they had technology and engineering to do that kind of stuff back then. So here's early cranes. This is how they built everything. This is how they built all the stuff. And there are the cranes working. And there's a guy there. And there's the steam engines that are powering all the equipment. And here's after one of the fires, and you can see everything gets exposed. And all the stuff coverings just turned into trash. You can see inside is this wood, just a wood building. There's one of the fires, a drawing of the fires. This building was the cold storage building, and it stored all the meat and stuff for the restaurants and the stands. And it also had an ice rink inside that you can skate on. And it was a horrible fire. They don't know how it started. Probably some of the machinery or something. And then people died. And this is a story that the firemen actually, they got trapped, and then their only choice was to jump off, or otherwise be burnt by the fire. So it was better just to jump off and die than be burnt alive. So kind of a sad story. So there's a real history to this that the Tartarian theorists are just throwing away. And it's just like the women's building. That women's building was put together exclusively by women's committee and all staffed by women, and they only allowed stuff inside that was made by other women's groups and women's organizations, and it was one of the first kind of early feminist things to happen, and that happened at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. It was after one of the fires, and you could see how the bricks were just lying. So everything was basically made out of brick and wood, just like you would build anything today. Or actually today, we don't even use brick anymore. We pretty much use cheap Chinese, what do you call that? That plaster wall material, and wood and aluminum framing. So here we go. You can see the cheap, again, the roofs are the giveaway. So just a standard factory style roof that was used well up into the 20th century. Tar and paper roofing, again, used to this day. And it's repeated all throughout all these buildings. All these buildings were just had tar and paper and tile roofs with glass panels for skylights. Here's the big building that everyone talks about, the largest building at the time. And again, it's just an iron frame. It was stuff stuck on it to make it look fancy. But otherwise, it's just a hollow, empty space inside. So it didn't take them much. Within 2 years, you can easily build anything with something like this. Again, those prefab iron girders and sections would just be brought in with the train and put in with those cranes that we saw. And there's these electric boats. Did I mention the electric boats? Yeah, they had little electric boats. Because the whole fair was powered by electric generators, and they had electric power back then. Here's a modern iron, not modern, but an 18th century iron building. Sometimes they would just build the whole thing on iron and make it look like it was neoclassical. Or they called it the bow style. But anyway, you see how they retrofitted it with glass panels. These are brand new. It's a 19th century building that they retrofitted to continue using it. This looks like Europe somewhere. Here's a colorized black and white photo. Everything's brand new. There's the paneling, the wood panelings underneath to cover up the pilings. And there's that big, large, I think they call the industrial building or something. Anyway. Okay, here we go. This is the midway. This is the entertainment section of the fair. And so we can see how cheaply everything was made. So here's another dome. And it's the frame, probably wooden frame inside, and just canvas, and then painted over the canvas. And this is probably tin or something like that for decoration. And you can see just it's warping and wrinkling. So it's not a real dome, it's just a fake dome. And again, just standard tar and paper roof like they make today. Just that tar based kind of tiles that you put on. And you see when it butts up against another part of the structure, you can see the flashing, just real crude and just quickly made. And even this minaret is kind of cheaply made, you can tell. And it looks nice, you know, but you get real close to it, it looks kind of cheap. And here, of course, they had electricity and stuff back then. And again, there's that dome. This is from the inside. So down here below on the stuff that's not tall, you can just use wood. And then for the bigger stuff, you just use iron. And you just put the stuff on the outside. Here's a little stand inside the midway area. So you can see how cheaply everything was made. So here's the inside of the frame kind of poking through. Just a plaster covering on the outside. Just wood nailed together, wood framing. And then where it meets the ground, it's all just crappy. You can stick your hand underneath here. It's just plaster. Like they didn't even bother to make it look nice. They just, boom, reach the bottom. You're done. So... So where it meets the landscaping, it's just all messy and junky. And this is called the Statue of the Republic. And this is not gold. It's just literally paper mache or like canvas mache and then gold leaf. And then actually it burnt down. They burnt it down on purpose, I think, to just get rid of everything. Kind of like a controlled burn, or I can't remember if it was burned down on purpose or it burnt in one of the last fires, the accidental fires. And so yeah, here we go, just the wood steps. And again, you see where it meets the other surfaces meet each other. It's all crappy. Here's the ticket booths where you pay for your ride on the electric boat. Here's inside another one of the buildings, this brand new wood buildings. Here's an example of the architecture of the time. This is a factory. This is how they built things back then. Here's the inside of that large building. Very impressive, very amazing. But again, just prefab parts built together. And all you need is a few cranes and a work crew. And you can just do this within 2 years, easy. Just repeat the same thing over and over again, over and over. 1, 2, 3, 4, both together. Then put on the coverings, put on the glass, and you're done. Pretty impressive, but not that big of a deal. It's just an empty shell. Okay, here we do the same thing these days. Nothing. That's all this today that we can do today was based on how they did it back then. Because this is the industrial age. This is the industrial revolution. Okay, here's the fire. There's the ice house burning because it was all wood. There's another fire. So they drew things in because of the bad, technology for the photography. And so sometimes they would go and draw things in to make it more clear. Or just even to tell a story. So maybe there's not even a person falling. They probably didn't capture the person because, again, you wouldn't be able to catch that with the slow shutter speeds, but you can draw it in and then tell the story. There's just more of the crappy crap they built for the fair. And here's the Midway Fairplex area. There's that dome. Everything was just built real cheap and quick. It was just a fair, county fair. So here's an example of a modern, we still build it the same way today. It's just, this could be anything from plastic to like fiberboard or cellulose or styrofoam even. And you just build a frame building and then cover it with this and you're done. Make it look fancy. So this is an early 1800s building in New York. I saw this in real life when I went to New York. This building here. And then again, this is the brick building wood frame, brick building. And then this is iron. It's not stonework at all. It's just iron. Iron panels that were mass produced. Okay, molded. They made molds and then poured the iron in and made these coverings. And then they just bolted it on to the brick and wood framing, a brick and wood building. And you're done. And you just paint it over. Here's an old, probably from the 19th century, sample pieces of molding. You can have your Greek style or Roman style. Okay, this is just like what we saw that was in that building. Here's the columns. Here's smaller columns you just make out of wood. You can see how the two pieces are fit together and the other pieces are fit together. All just different pieces. Someone carved them and then put the pieces together. So you can just sit there. You have a bunch of wood crafters making these all day, and you sell them, and it's not even glued on well. And it's all just glued and nailed together. And then boom, you have a column. These aren't load bearing. These are just for decoration. Same thing. Same thing for here. You don't need to build these out of stone. You just make them out of wood and paint them. So you can see just bits of wood. This is how they made those coverings and design pieces for the buildings. Here, this is my mom's prize, one of my mom's prized possessions. This is the living room. And again, so it looks like a stone mantle, right? For a fireplace, but it's not, it's just wood painted over. This is how they did it back then. I don't know when this was made, but this is actually, we bought this from, or she bought it from an auction at Universal Studios. Back in the day, they would just, every once in a while, sell off all their props that they used in movies from, going way back to the early days of filmmaking. But this is an example of how they did stuff all the way up into the early 20th century. Well, even today, you can go to Home Depot and buy stuff like this and put it in your room and decorate your room. And it's just pieces of wood or whatever different kinds of material glued together. That's how they made those buildings back in the day. This is the Mayan exhibit, and these are not actual Mayan stones. They just took the moldings over in the Yucatan and wherever and made these are paper mache blocks. So you can see it's floating above the ground because it's underneath as a frame. And this is just paper mache and then painted. And there's even an article that you can find where the guy is like laughing because everybody thought it was real, but then the guy lifts it up with one hand and inside it's hollow. And you can see it's just paneling. See, you can see the paneling. It's panels. Okay. It's all just Disneyland. See here, again, the molding over the frame and then the actual building here. There's a modern example. Made in China. And here's that people mover thing that barely worked. It hardly worked. How much was it? 5 cents to ride. And then Chicago, again, they had roads and infrastructure to do whatever they wanted. There's the Ferris wheel completed. There's that dome again. And here's the roofs again. The giveaway is the cheap, just tarred over roof. Because all this stuff wasn't meant to last. It's just all fake, cheap buildings. Especially for this part, the kind of fair part, the amusement section of the park, of the fair. Looks like the Palace of Fine Arts, maybe. So I think the superstructure was masonry, probably just cinder blocks. And then all the rest of it was wood framing, and especially the roof and the domes. And then they just decorated. And you can start to see these aren't real columns. There's a frame underneath. And these aren't real load bearing. It just has to look good. The weight bearing structure is behind all of this. We'll see that later. Here it is. So this is all cinder block construction and brick construction. And then we saw these iron columns before. That's actually what's holding the roof up. And the roof is just metal and cabling and glass tilings for skylights. And we saw that this is just wood frame with stuff to make it on the outside to make it look solid. And again, the stuff was just stuck on the outside, the columns and everything. You can see the bricks here, just cinder blocks. And this is the only one of two only real structures that were built. Again, because the insurance company demanded a real structure to house the priceless artwork inside. Here's an aerial view, probably in the 30s, because you can tell by the early 20th century architecture here. And it's also from an airplane. So, yeah, so just basic brick building, how you would build any museum even today, just empty rooms to store the artwork and exhibits. So this is under disrepair pretty much right after the fair ended. It just started falling apart because everything outside was just cheaply made and not substantial. And then later on they refurbished it and retrofitted everything, and it's a modern functioning museum today in Chicago. So there it is, all finished and built. It looks nice, but again, it's all fakery on the outside of a simple, just coverings on a simple brick building. Here, everything's starting to fall apart. Here you can see inside the columns. They weren't real columns, just wooden frames with probably plaster or wood coverings to make the columns look real. You can see inside everything's falling apart. And you can see here the framing, making the bigger columns. You can see how all the pieces are together. And again, so here's a good example of those big columns that looked all fancy and real, but inside it's just a frame. This is inside either the Palace of Fine Arts, part of the Palace of Fine Arts again, yeah. So here are those same iron. These are the actual iron weight-bearing columns. So these are just mass-produced in molds at an ironwork factory. And you just ship them in on a train and put them up, connect everything together. And there's the building today, refurbished and rebuilt. Here's the Palace of Fine Arts of the San Francisco World's Fair, I think in 1903. So again, it's just wood structure underneath. See how it's just torn apart. Just wood frame with fake coverings on the outside. There's the Palace of Fine Arts in Chicago. Again, just rotting and falling apart. Not soon after the fair. Here's a picture of the inside. So these smaller columns are like the ones that we saw, those pictures. It's just wood. And it's just rotting and falling apart. Here's the wood paneling for the inside. Everything's just dilapidating and coming apart. It's all wood. None of it is stonework, except for the actual load-bearing walls. Here, this looks like it's cinder block or concrete. Here's what happens to these iron coverings. If you don't maintain them, they start to rust away. And you see here how they did it. So it's just a brick building, and then with fake coverings and moldings on the outside to make it look like it's a classical building, but it's not. It's just a brick building with fake iron or plaster coverings on the outside. There's the inside of that main big building, or one of them, and again, just prefab iron components, just what do you call those? Rivets, riveted together. You just haul them in and build it. Just repeat the same pattern over and over again, and it's just like a giant erector set. Here's what we can do today based on what they did yesterday. More modern. Okay, so this is the Chicago fire 20 years prior. Again, just to show that how everything was built. There's nothing ancient about any of these buildings, because Tartarian theories kind of sometimes, some of them say that all the buildings, anything that looks old or neoclassical, it was actually classical, built in ancient times before Westerners came to the New World. But no, it's just brick buildings with these fake coverings. You can see how if these buildings are destroyed, all the thousands of bricks are just turned into rubble. Okay. And again, this is when things were worth what they were worth. And everything labor was cheap. There was no permits. You just build whatever you needed. There's the fire again. And inside again, just more of the inside structures to show that these were just, okay, so this is cool. This is the transportation building. It looks crazy and looks ornate and looks like an ancient structure built thousands of years ago, right? How could they build it within 2 years in the 1800s, right? How could they do that? How could they possibly do this? How could they build that? Womp womp. It's just a wood frame, the same old wood frames that we've been seeing all along. And then you glue all that, or nail or adhere all these mass-produced panelings from a factory, and then you just put it all together. Or just paint. And this looks like it's just painted over. And these are stuck on, these detailings. But in reality, and this is how they make, movies today, even. So you make a sound stage and you make a set, this could be, on one of the Star Wars sets. They still build it today. They build a wooden frame and then they decorate it to make it look like a building on Tatooine or whatever planet you want. And then you tear it down when you're done. Same principle. And even movies during this time, this age, it was the 1800s, 1890s. So they had early cinematography and stuff going on then. This is how they would make, not too many years later, make all those old black and white films like Cecil B. DeMille. That's how they made those sets. They just built things like this and then decorated the outside with plaster and paint. Okay, here's Westinghouse got the contract to power the fair. And this is one of the machine building. I forget what they call it, but anyway, you can see Stanley, Westinghouse, all the names that we're familiar with today. This is all the technology that they had back then. This is the generators that they had available to them at the time. And this is actually, I think this is the actual generator building that Westinghouse used to power the fair. And I think you can go see this. It was really loud, so not too many people went to check this out. And here's one of the big generators. So again, just steam power, and you turn the generator, and you can make all the electricity you needed. So again, just in a wooden building. And here's all the infrastructure. So they had this is the behind the administration building, and there's Lake Michigan, and people just got trained in. Here's this is from a Tesla website, because Tesla had pictures of the Tesla exhibit, which they had here. So this is more machinery. This is actually the switching board for the generators. And here's an example of the architectural drawings to represent how they built stuff back then. You build an iron frame and then just cover it with plaster and wood and paint over it. Okay, you just bolt all this stuff together, and boom, you have a building. So it's not too incredible. I know it kind of sounds incredible, but it's not. We just kind of forget that they were able to do these things, and the Tartarian theorists take advantage of our bad education system, and people get suckered into believing that these were incredible, that humans couldn't possibly have built this in the 1890s. Well, this is how they did things back then, and some of the stuff exists today in cities all over the Western world mostly. And there's from one of the towers on one of the taller buildings. They had spotlights, and again, they had technology and stuff then to do stuff. And again, the cheap tar and paper roofs and cheap factory roofing. Here again, just iron works. And that's it. Okay, that's it. That's my presentation. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.